You know that feeling, that sense of just being swamped, trying to make sense of, well, pretty much everything.
Oh, absolutely. One minute you're reading about, I don't know, gene editing. The next, it's some complex economic trend, or maybe the geopolitics of somewhere you barely knew existed.
Exactly. And the speed is just, it's dizzying. Nuclear threats, political splits, AI taking off, even de-extinction. It's wow.
Yeah, and it's not just the speed, is it? It's the constant spin, the different narratives flying around. Sometimes it feels like you're wading through deliberate misinformation just to figure out what's actually happening.
Right. You want to be informed, you need to be to make good decisions, but it feels like this fire hose of information, often
Yeah.
contradictory, just pushes you further away from, really understanding.
It's just looking for the signal and all that noise. The
Yeah.
key takeaways without getting completely buried.
Precisely. And that's really what we're trying to do here in this deep dive.
Yeah, we're tackling that core challenge.
Yeah.
How do you find some reliable ground? How do you navigate all this complexity?
And today, we're looking at a framework for that, inspired by the thinking of Tom Bilyeu.
That's right. We're drawing from his YouTube video, How to Escape the Media Trap, the mindset that actually works.
Okay, so Bilyeu talks about his physics of progress algorithm. Sounds intriguing. What's the mission here? What's it supposed to help us do?
Basically, it's a mental toolkit. It's designed to help you cut through the manipulation, see your own biases, and avoid getting trapped by, well, flawed thinking yours or someone else's.
Okay, so where does he start with this? What's the foundational idea?
It starts with something that sounds simple but is actually pretty profound. He realized the danger of confusing feeling right with actually being right.
Ah, yeah, that definitely resonates. It's so easy to grab onto an idea that fits what you already think. It just feels true.
Exactly. And because it feels right, you don't challenge it. But Bill Yu argues that's a trap. He says you need a mental model for built-in error correction.
A way to double check yourself, essentially. To avoid building on shaky ground because you mistook a feeling for a fact.
Precisely. Think about times you've been absolutely sure about something, then later found out you were totally off base.
Oh, definitely. Humbling, isn't it?
Very. And that feeling of certainty wasn't connected to the facts. It was just a feeling. And this leads into his 3 early realizations.
Okay. What were they?
So first, he saw that the ego, the desire to be seen as right is often a dead end. But the practical need to find the right answer to solve a problem, that's essential for making any progress.
Okay, subtle but important difference. Being right versus finding the right answer.
Exactly. Second, he noticed that basic human tendency, we're far more likely to do what feels good or comfortable in the moment, rather than what actually works long term.
The path of least resistance, emotionally speaking.
You got it. And third, he figured that to overcome this, to actually succeed, you need a system, an error correction model that deliberately pushes past your ego and your emotional reactions.
Like a personal quality control process for your own thinking. Okay, so Bilyeu started out very focused on business success, personal achievement. How did he shift to applying this to bigger things like, the economy or politics?
Yeah, that's a really key part of his journey. He realized that the same faulty thinking, the same susceptibility to bias and manipulation that trips us up personally, it operates on a massive scale with these global issues.
So ignoring finance, politics, tech, that's like trying to run a race without knowing the rules or the shape of the track.
Pretty much. He understood you couldn't isolate yourself. These larger forces impact everything.
And he gets that stay in your lane criticism sometimes, right? When he talks about things outside of entrepreneurship.
He does. But his argument back is crucial, I think, for anyone today. He basically says, look, thinking for yourself is your only real defense against being manipulated. If you just blindly accept what supposed experts say without using your own critical thinking, you're making yourself vulnerable. Doesn't matter how smart the expert seems.
Okay, that makes sense. It's about developing your own filters. Which brings us nicely to the core, his 5-part algorithm. Let's get into it. Part 1 is recognize your distorted frame of reference. What does he mean by frame of reference?
Okay, so think of it like the operating system for your brain. It's the collection of assumptions, beliefs, and values that filters everything you perceive. It shapes how you interpret information.
And the key thing is we don't usually choose this software consciously.
Right. A huge chunk of it is inherited. It comes from your biology, your upbringing, your culture, maybe past experiences you didn't fully process. It's sort of preloaded.
So we're all walking around with these unique filters, looking at the same world, but seeing slightly different things based on that internal programming.
Exactly. That's why two people can look at the exact same event, the same data, and come away with completely different conclusions. Their frames are different.
It makes sense. What feels like objective truth to me might just be a reflection of my inherited beliefs.
And we rarely question it, do we? Because it feels so normal.
Hmm.
So, right, like you said earlier, we tend to do what feels right.
So how does Bilyeu define what works then, if feels right isn't reliable?
He ties works to fulfillment. Actions that lead to genuine fulfillment, which he defines as doing something you're passionate about that also uplifts you and others. It's not just about personal gain.
Okay, that's a high bar. So if our frame might be leading us away from what actually works, how do we even start to see it? He mentions thinking from first principles.
Right. Thinking from first principles is about digging down, breaking a situation or problem down to its most basic fundamental truths, the things you know for sure, or as close to sure as possible.
Instead of just relying on analogies or what people usually do or how things seem on the surface.
Exactly. You question the underlying assumptions. Like he uses the example of, say, Trump's trade war with China. Instead of getting caught up in the you versus them political stuff, a first principles approach would look at the fundamental economics. How do global supply chains actually function? What are the predictable effects of tariffs based on economic laws? Forget how it feels politically for a moment.
Focus on the cause and effect. He mentions immigration policy too, right? Same idea.
Yeah. Instead of just picking a side based on your group affiliation, ask, what is the actual problem we're trying to solve here? Is it labor shortages, security concerns, humanitarian issues? Then you evaluate proposed solutions based on whether they're likely to effectively address that specific problem, considering the long-term consequences.
It's about detaching from the tribalism and focusing on function. He uses a historical example too, right? Napoleon.
Yes, Napoleon's invasion of Russia. A classic case of a brilliant strategist failing catastrophically because he didn't update his frame of reference. His assumptions about supply lines, enemy tactics, the weather, they were based on past European campaigns.
And they just didn't apply in Russia. His frame was outdated and he stuck to it.
To disastrous effect. It's a powerful warning about clinging to assumptions that no longer match reality. So for you listening, it's worth asking, where might my assumptions be flawed? Where is my frame maybe holding me back?
Good question. Okay, so after recognizing the frame, what's part 2 of the algorithm?
Part 2 flows directly from that. It's map out cause and effect.
Right. Once you start questioning your assumptions, you need to figure out how things actually connect.
Exactly. It's about understanding the direct relationships. If I do X, what is the actual likely consequence Y? Not just these things seem to happen around the same time.
Moving beyond correlation to causation.
Precisely. Because if you don't understand the real mechanisms, you can't solve problems effectively or predict outcomes reliably. Remember, it's about finding the right answer, not just feeling right.
Okay, makes sense. Clear thinking requires understanding how things actually work. Now, part 3. Seek disconfirming evidence and diverse sources. This sounds like actively trying to prove yourself wrong.
It kind of is. It's about intellectual humility. You start with the assumption, okay, I might be wrong about this. Then you actively go looking for information, for perspectives that contradict your current belief.
Why is that so important?
Because it's the best way to avoid building your understanding on a faulty foundation. It forces you outside your own echo chamber. Bilyeu stresses this helps you avoid being overly partisan or dogmatic.
Right, he talks about prioritizing frameworks over rigid ideologies. Don't get stuck.
Yeah, because ideologies can become like prisons for your thinking. They make you resistant to new information if it doesn't fit the dogma. It leads to what he calls intellectual crystallization. You stop being nimble.
He mentions that old saying, science progresses one funeral at a time.
Which is a bit grim. But it highlights how hard it is for people, even scientists, to let go of established ideas they're invested in.
So in a world where, let's face it, there are constant attempts to manipulate us and confirm our biases, actively looking for evidence that challenges us is like a defense mechanism.
A crucial one. You have to be your own most rigorous critic.
Okay, a vital step. What's part 4?
Part 4 is judge correctness by results. Very pragmatic.
So does it actually work in the real world?
Pretty much. The ultimate test of an idea, a strategy, a belief system is the outcome it produces. Are your actions, based on your beliefs, actually getting you closer to your goals? Are they leading to that fulfillment we talked about?
And if not?
Then something's wrong. Either your frame is off, your understanding of cause and effect is flawed, or both. Bill Yu talks about his own focus on just getting a tiny bit better every single day. That focus on incremental improvement, judged by results, leads to compounding gains.
It's like judging a tree by its fruit. And if the fruit is bad, you don't just keep watering the same way, right? You figure out what needs to change.
Exactly. You have to be willing to iterate fast. When something isn't working, don't double down out of ego. Adjust.
Yep.
Adapt. Learn from the feedback the world is giving you.
Okay, so we have recognize your frame, map cause and effect, seek disconfirming evidence, judge by results. What's the fifth and final part?
The fifth is, remember you're having a biological experience.
Okay. Bringing it back down to earth.
Very much so. It's a reminder that we aren't just these rational thinking minds floating in space. We are biological creatures.
Driven by chemistry, hormones, instincts.
All shaped by millions of years of evolution geared primarily towards survival and reproduction, not necessarily towards finding objective truth or even being happy in the modern sense.
He mentions things like craving status, fearing change, taking things personally. These have evolutionary roots.
Absolutely. Tribalism, loss aversion. These aren't logical choices most of the time. They're deep-seated biological programs.
Yeah.
We are, as he puts it, chemical processing plants, easily swayed by these biological imperatives.
And this is where things like AI become relevant, because AI can learn to push those biological buttons.
That's his crucial point here. AI doesn't have feelings, but it's getting incredibly good at learning what triggers our feelings, what captures our attention based on our biology: fear, outrage, validation.
So understanding our own biology is key to not being essentially hacked by algorithms or, frankly, by other people who understand these triggers.
Yes. Learning to think clearly, using the other steps, is partly about overriding or managing these biological impulses so you are in control, not some external force playing on your instincts.
He also brings up incentives here, right, under this biological umbrella.
He does, because incentives tap directly into our fundamental drives. People generally do what they are incentivized to do, not necessarily what's right, but what brings reward or avoids pain, according to their frame and biology.
How does inflation fit in as an example?
He uses it to show how incentives can lead to bad long-term outcomes. Printing money might feel good initially, like getting something for free,
Right.
or it allows governments to spend without obviously taxing. But the incentive structure, he argues, ignores the long-term consequence, which is the debasement of the currency that affects everyone. It plays on our desire for immediate ease over future stability.
That short-term thinking, like Popeye. I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today.
Exactly. Or Homer Simpson's line about beer being the cause of and solution to all life's problems.
No.
It captures that human tendency to go for the immediate fix, even if it creates bigger problems down the line.
He even suggests the three branches of government are sort of a design to counteract these flawed human impulses, checks and balances against short-term thinking or power grabs.
It's a structural way to try and mitigate our biological tendencies, and he uses the Boeing 737 MAX example too.
Right, that was tragic. How do incentives play in there?
The argument is the incentive structure became skewed. The pressure to beat Airbus, to get the plane to market quickly, potentially overrode the safety incentives. It wasn't necessarily malice, but the dominant incentive led to shortcuts with catastrophic results.
A powerful example of incentives driving behavior, even in high-stakes situations. So, looking back at all 5 steps, what's the big takeaway, the core message?
For me, it really boils down to the need for constant vigilance about your own thinking. It's about cultivating this mindset of continuous learning and self-correction.
Question everything, especially yourself.
Kind of, yeah. Question your assumptions, frame of reference, understand the real connections, cause and effect, actively challenge your beliefs, disconfirming evidence, demand real-world proof, results, and always remember you're dealing with your own messy human biology. The algorithm is a framework for doing that systematically.
It's a demanding process, but it sounds essential for navigating the world we live in. So here's something for you, the listener, to maybe chew on.
Yeah.
Pick one area, just one part of your life or your understanding of the world where you suspect your frame of reference might be a bit shaky or maybe limiting you.
Okay.
And then think about applying just one of these steps. Maybe actively seek out someone who holds the opposite view and really try to understand their reasoning, or try to map out the cause and effect of your current approach in that area. See what happens.
That's a great challenge. It's about making this practical. These aren't just abstract ideas. They're tools you can actually use. We really hope you engage with this. Think about how it applies day to day.
Because becoming a more critical thinker isn't just academic, it feels like a survival skill these days.
Absolutely. In a world constantly changing and, frankly, full of noise and manipulation, the ability to think clearly, to learn continuously, and to stay grounded in reality is invaluable.
Well said. This deep dive into Tom Lee's physics of progress definitely gives us a lot to think about regarding intellectual humility and the hard work of seeking truth. Thanks for exploring all this with us.